All right, let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, Episode 5, Part 1, where we are finally meeting the mitochondria. My ultimate goal here is to make these microscopic worlds really come alive for you. And honestly, mitochondria are probably some of the most fascinating biological structures you're ever going to encounter. Seriously, we're going to completely change how you view your own biology today. So what does powerhouse of the cell actually mean? And, well, what do they really look like? You've definitely heard that classic phrase before. Now, if you peek inside a cell, mitochondria often look like these tiny, floating jelly beans. But hey, don't let that simple, kind of unassuming shape fool you. They might look like they're just, bobbing around aimlessly in the cytoplasm, but inside, they are an absolute powerhouse of incredibly complex machinery.
To actually understand how they work, we really have to look at their architecture. They're actually double-layered, so they have this smooth outer shell and a crumpled, highly folded inner membrane. Think of it kind of like a sleeping bag stuffed inside a perfectly fitted stuff sack. That smooth outer boundary protects the organelle, right? While the real magic, that incredibly complex architecture we just mentioned, happens right there on that tightly packed, crumpled interior.
Now, those inner folds, they're called cristae, and they give the mitochondria a massive amount of surface area to do their job. And why does surface area matter so much? Well, because biological work actually takes physical space. By folding up like an accordion, the mitochondria pack maximum working space into a tiny microscopic footprint. And that job is taking the nutrients from your food, say the sugars from a slice of pizza, and turning it into usable energy.
The terminology behind this magic trick is just absolutely fascinating. This energy-making process is called cellular respiration. Basically, it uses the oxygen you breathe to extract power from your food. So every single time you take a deep breath in, that oxygen is literally being routed straight to these little jelly beans to help burn through those pizza sugars. It's actually the fundamental biological reason we even need to breathe in the first place.
But here's the thing, the mitochondria don't do all the work completely alone. The cell actually starts this whole process out in the cytoplasm. It breaks down glucose there and then sends the smaller pieces into the mitochondria to extract high-energy electrons. It's essentially a prep kitchen. The cytoplasm chops up the raw ingredients, and the mitochondria take those prepped pieces to run the heavy-duty energy extraction. And the ultimate goal of this entire process is to make a molecule called ATP. You can think of ATP as the literal battery power that keeps your cells, and, well, you, completely alive. Without ATP, cellular activity grinds to an absolute halt. Every heartbeat, every thought, and every single movement of your muscles is powered by these tiny molecular batteries being constantly recharged on the microscopic level. To build these ATP batteries, those inner folds house a microscopic machine called ATP synthase. Now, synthase just means to make, but what's truly mind-blowing here is that this isn't just some random chemical soup. ATP synthase is literally a mechanical rotary motor. Yes, an actual physical machine spinning incredibly fast, embedded right there in those crumpled Cristae folds. So you're probably wondering, how does a biological motor actually spin? Well, to run this machine, the cell uses protons, which are essentially just hydrogen ions. Imagine them as a rushing river of tiny, positively charged particles. That rushing river of protons is the exact fuel that physically spins the ATP synthase machine to crank out the power. It's exactly like water rushing through a hydroelectric dam to turn a turbine, but on a microscopic scale inside your own body.
And as you might guess, all this intense chemical and mechanical action generates some serious heat. In fact, inside your cells, mitochondria can run at a scorching 50 degrees Celsius. That's 122 degrees Fahrenheit. Just let that sink in for a second. Your overall body temperature is about 98.6 degrees, but these little cellular engines are running hot enough to practically cook an egg. They're tiny, microscopic radiators keeping you warm from the inside out.
But wait, mitochondria aren't just hot, static batteries, though. They're living, shape-shifting structures that are constantly moving around. They actually travel across your cell on these microscopic tracks, stretching out and even fusing together into long networks just to share resources. They're incredibly dynamic, actively seeking out parts of the cell that need the most energy and delivering it right to the front lines.
And here is the biggest plot twist. They have their very own secret DNA, completely separate from the nucleus, and it's inherited only from your mom. No way, right? Because they have their own DNA, they act kind of like an independent security system, or a sentinel that detects stress or damage in the cell. They are like a specialized subunit within your cells, maintaining their own rulebook and keeping a watchful eye on cellular health independently of the main nucleus.
Now we get to my absolute favorite part. This brings us to MIPS, which stands for the Mitochondrial Information Processing System. So we're shifting from just thinking about them as isolated power plants to realizing they're essentially biological computers actively crunching data.
That's basically a fancy way of saying mitochondria act like smart sensors. They detect exactly what the cell needs, like changes in oxygen or nutrients. And to keep the entire cell balanced, they constantly text the boss, the nucleus, by sending out chemical signals that can actually change how your DNA is read. Yeah, they are literally calling the shots based on the environment, actively telling the main control center to adjust its long-term strategy.
So as you can see, calling them just a powerhouse is way too simple. They are the energy-producing, heat-generating information processors of your cells. They're the vital communication hubs that keep the entire microscopic city of your cell functioning, adapting, and ultimately surviving through whatever stress comes its way. So let's quickly recap the vocabulary we've covered today. We've got respiration, ATP, ATP synthase, protons, and MIPS. With those concepts down, you are officially prepped for understanding the real heavy machinery of the cell. We've explored their complex structure, that intense heat they generate, their independent DNA, and the incredible text messaging system they use to help run the show. Coming up in Part 2, we'll be zooming in on the motor and decoding the nucleus texts. But for now that we've decoded the machinery, just think about this. Billions of tiny, independent machines inside you are running at 122 degrees right this very second, just so you have the energy to sit there and process this information. Pretty wild, right? Keep asking questions, stay curious, and we'll see you in the next explainer.